The Pakistan Navy Chief of Naval Staff just revealed that the Pakistan Navy will design an original submarine in the future after the Hangor-class submarines are inducted. And hello, and welcome to a Quwa Quick Take. So Arslan Khan will be off for a couple of weeks with some work, and as a result, we'll miss a couple of episodes of Defense Uncut. However, I will actually post a few quick takes in the lead up until our episodes resume on some ongoing Pakistani defense topics. And Asim will also be back for Pulse Check. So I hope to continue the quick take stuff along with Defense Uncut in the future. But once the podcast returns, I will switch the show to revisiting some of the past and history of Pakistan's military procurements and developments, the evolution of the industry, and so on. Let's just dive into today's topic. Recently, Asian Defense Journal, or ADJ, released an interview with the current PN, Chief of Naval Staff, Admiral Naveed Ashraf. It's an interesting interview, and you'll find the link to it in the descriptions and the comments. Be sure to give ADJ a visit. A big shout out to them for getting this together. Now, to a question about the Hangor-class submarine, for which the Pakistan Navy has 8 new boats on order, with the first recently arriving in June of this year. Admiral Ashraf revealed that there is a plan to design and build an original submarine. Now, this strikes really close to me because for those of you who have followed Quwa over the past few years and even the Defense Uncut series, we have been talking about this for a while. In fact, there was an episode between Arslan and I last year where we actually brought this up. And basically the PN set a vision back in 2020, 2021 to become what it called a submarine building navy. And to get there, it would have to develop its own submarine, basically. Now, I've been writing about this for years and had spelled out how this could likely play out, which I'll unpack a bit later in the video. But you can obviously read all of that documentation in detail through Quwa Plus on the website. But the point is this, like the Jinnah-class frigate or the Sea Sultan long-range maritime patrol aircraft, the PN wants its own in-house submarine. So what does that mean? Well, before that, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell to get notified every time I upload a new video. And be sure to leave a comment on what you'd like me to cover next on the channel. Well, back to the video. If you caught my last video about nuclear submarines, I think an indigenous submarine could mean a lot of things. But in this context, the CNS is talking about conventional submarines. More specifically, I think he's really talking about the eventual goal of one day replacing the Agosta 90Bs. In fact, the Agosta 90Bs or the Khalid-class submarines, while relatively new compared to the Agosta 70s and the Daphne-class submarines before them, they have some challenges on the horizon when it comes to operating them. Support from Naval Group, which was formerly DCNS in France, is pretty thin. With these sorts of submarines, once you lose OEM support or can't secure long-term after-sales support, it becomes quite difficult and costly to keep these submarines running for extended periods, in terms of beyond after their induction date. For example, by 2030, the first Khalid-class submarine, PNSM Khalid, will be around 30 years of age. By 2040, it'll be 40 years of age and so on. So at that point, the maintenance costs and overhead for keeping those running will start to mount quite significantly. Now, I'm not saying that the PN will replace the Agosta 90Bs anytime soon. No, I'm just trying to draw attention to how the PN will eventually get to that point. So I estimate that the PN will start work on its original submarine program before 2030 and will aim to get the first boat out for sea trials before 2040. By the time 2040 rolls around, that will coincide with basically the first 40 years of the Agosta 90B, with the PNSM Khalid reaching that age, which I think is a fair timeline to start discussing its replacement. So returning to the interview, the CNS had spelled out quite a few things if we read it closely. First, the Hangor program is helping a lot from a capacity and infrastructure standpoint. So for example, with China's help, the PN's been able to move the production of submarines from the naval dockyard to the commercial dockyard. I think the shift to the commercial dockyard opens up a few other dynamics as well. For example, back in 2017, Karachi Shipyard Engineering Works acquired a ship lift and transfer system from the Norwegian OEM TTS Group. Now, this system, which was called Syncrolift, was tailored to help KSEW, or Karachi Shipyards, for the rest of this video, to set up 13 inland workstations. So basically, Karachi shipyards would construct the ships inland rather than right by the sea. And once the ships or boats are complete, it would use these motorized rails to move these units to the sea for sea trials, basically. What this does is that it removes a production side bottleneck because you only have a finite amount of space to basically work with on the coastline. And that also is a high risk area in terms of naval engagements. So in theory, what could happen in the long run is that we might even see additional workstations expanded or added on to what Karachi Shipyards has, or maybe even through future shipyards, we see a similar arrangement, reached through TTS Group or some other OEM. Additionally, I think, we might even see special submarines for inland, additionally, I think we might also see a situation where this program gets expanded in a way where, whether it's in Karachi or a different shipyard, that we have special facilities for inland submarine construction, as well as, again, specialized facilities for maintenance, repairs, overhauls, and servicing and upgrades down the line as well. So anyways, you can see from the photo here of a PN Barber-class Miljam corvette being built on one of these Syncrolift workstations. What had happened with the Agosta 90Bs was that Karachi Shipyards assembled one from semi-knockdown kits from France, and then it constructed one on its own. It was a very difficult project, but with the Hangors, the sense I get is that the Chinese have helped Pakistan to build a genuine production program where they can sort of work on multiple boats at the same time in a more systemized manner. So there's a lot of lessons here in terms of managing different supply chains, multiple boat projects, and that kind of stuff, which wasn't there with the Agosta 90B because that was like really the first inaugural attempt at constructing a submarine in Pakistan, even though it was under license. Second, the CNS also suggested that the option for additional Hangor-class submarines is there as well, and that this would be a separate purchase from the original program. Basically, the PN absolutely wants to design its own submarine, and there are various advantages for doing so. But it has kept the door open for more Hangors should it need a mature and tested design to help shore up its numbers sooner. You could possibly see a scenario where the PN acquires secondhand Chinese boats and it carries out an overhaul and upgrade program at home, since the capacity to support the Hangor, which itself is a derivative of the Type 039B Yuan-class, is already in Pakistan at this point. This leaves the current and future naval leadership with solid options for growing the PN submarine fleet a bit faster. And finally, the part you're here for, there's that goal to design and build an original submarine. Now, having followed this for a few years, my understanding is that the PN wants to basically design something tailored specifically for its anti-access and area denial needs. My hunch is that they will start with a very focused design, standard anti-ship, anti-submarine warfare boat, a smaller platform than the Hangor-class, probably around the size of the Agosta 90B, which is around 1,700 to 2,000 tons in displacement. Interestingly, back at IDEAS 2018, the Turkish firm STM had displayed its submarine proposal for the Turkish Navy called the XTS 1700. And the Turkish Navy decided to pursue a different platform through its own in-house bureau, but the STM XTS 1700 was later promoted to Pakistan, and you would have seen its model with various officials at the Ministry of Defense Production, the PN Directorate of Procurement, and so on. Now, I'm not saying that the PN would necessarily pick up the XTS 1700, but I do think what we saw from the core concept or design, that is really an approximation of what the PN is likely aiming for with its own original submarine program. And the one thing I think it really wants to focus on, in addition to the standard anti-ship, anti-submarine warfare elements, is a very, very strong focus on stealth. So here's where they might look at more, let's say, innovative or new ways of achieving acoustic reduction, meaning techniques and technology to absolutely minimize vibrations underwater. That could lead them to pursue different air-independent propulsion systems or AIP systems. For example, right now the Hangors use the Stirling system, and then on the Agosta 90Bs, we have the MESMA system. I think the PN might be looking forward to a potential fuel cell AIP system that might be looking forward to acquiring lithium-ion batteries so as to drive more energy efficiency and charge retention. And they might even pursue more advanced hull building and materials technology, especially in terms of steel. So, and this is where pursuing that original design starts to matter more. If you design a submarine and own its intellectual property, you will have much more flexibility in selecting the core subsystems and critical inputs. So for example, when you work with the Europeans or the Chinese designs off the shelf, you need to work with their input selections and their suppliers. And that's a trade-off you would make for a proven system, but it can have issues as well. So for example, The OEM that has designed the submarine is basically the middleman between you and the suppliers. It'll provide the kits and documentation. It'll even provide, some of the raw materials maybe, but your ability to ask for customizations, it would be pretty limited. You would also have to be happy with the design on offer. And many times you might not have the ability to leverage the latest technology or inputs that are available on the market without paying that OEM to take on the design and integration work for you. Now, to its credit, the PN has been moving in this interesting direction where it's been building the design and integration expertise in-house through the Naval Research and Development Institute, NRDI, which is also known as the Platform Design Wing or PDW. And the way they've been doing so is through basically partnerships with foreign OEMs, such as Turkey's Asfat for the Jinnah-class frigate, or in the case of the Sea Sultan long-range maritime patrol aircraft, with South Africa's Paramount Group and Italy's Leonardo. Now, in some ways, these partnerships might remind you a little bit of how the PAF pursued the JF-17, but there are some big differences. In addition to transfer of technology for local production, these OEM partners actually have to help NRDI develop its own in-house design and development capacity. So if you've been following NRDI, and again, I recommend you subscribe to Quwa Plus if you can, you'll find that they've been signing these additional agreements with other OEMs like Turkish Aerospace. Like, what would NRDI want from Turkish Aerospace? I wonder. Maybe it could be related to helicopters. Who knows? But the point being is that NRDI wants to reach a point where whenever the PN has a requirement or need in the future, it will go ahead and design it. So these OEMs are actually also involved in helping the NRDI reach and build those internal design capabilities. Like, if you wanted to make a link with the JF-17, it would actually be the equivalent of not only the PF co-investing in the JF-17 and commissioning Shenzhou to go develop the fighter, it's the equivalent of Shenzhou sending in teams and teams of people to PAC and then literally training Pakistanis on how to do aircraft design and development work in Pakistan. Like, that is the equivalent we're talking about. And then also setting up things like wind tunnel facilities, labs and all that kind of stuff for future aircraft related R&D. Like, this is the equivalent we're talking about, but it's being applied right now. Things like surface warships, through the Maritime Patrol Aircraft Program, through drones, through patrol boats, you name it. So now it's important to note that all this stuff that's happening within the NRDI, it doesn't mean that it'll lead to indigenization in every aspect. Rather, what we're talking about here is the ability to design the product within NRDI. But once you own the design, you basically cut out the OEMs. Basically, NRDI becomes the OEM, and then it can speak to the suppliers directly. So now, with this context, in theory, and the NRDI can go and talk to suppliers from China, Turkey, Europe, the USA, South Korea, and so on. It can design something according to the exact preferences of the Pakistan Navy, and even add things that the PN really wants, skip the stuff that would add to the cost needlessly, and progress from there. That being said, however, these things are obviously not simple. NRDI is still a novice in the space, and it still needs a lot of help in its internal capacity building, knowledge transfer, and guidance in dealing with suppliers, integrating systems of different origins, and so on. But it's been very honest about these things and upfront about the slow pace of its work. For sure. That's why these original projects like the Jinnah-class frigate or the Sea Sultan have to this point taken time and have also involved bigger, more experienced players. Like, take for example the Sea Sultan. The PN has largely deferred the work to Paramount Group and Leonardo. Both are very experienced OEMs and partners. But one of them, Leonardo, is a global giant in Europe. It's like to Europe what RTX, for example, is to the US. Like, that's how big Leonardo is. With the Jinnah-class frigate, the PN partnered with the Turkey's Asfat group, and the Jinnah-class frigate itself is a follow-on to the Babur-class Belgium corvette program. So the approach we're seeing here is that what the PN has been doing is basically it's been starting off with like an off-the-shelf purchase, like the Babur-class, and then it would append the transfer of technology and original design work to it. So this goes back to the interview where the Chief of Naval Staff said that through TOT, Pakistan will, and I quote, gain expertise in advanced submarine design, construction techniques, systems integration, and quality control processes, enabling Karachi Shipyard Engineering Works to bolster its capabilities in building and outfitting of submarines, meaning that the original submarine project will manifest through a similar transfer of technology deal to the Jinnah-class frigate, basically. Now, I don't think Admiral Ashraf was referring to the Hangors in this context, because he said this point a bit later as a principle that for the PN to get to its original submarine project, it will need additional TOT deals that will be conducted in a phased approach and will take time. And he also mentioned that the way the TOT had worked out with China is that it opens up the PN to buy more Hangor-class submarines, but that this is a separate initiative for an original submarine as well. And this is key because, again, if you follow Quwa, you'll know that the Pakistan Navy also has a very low-key, quiet second submarine program in the works. And this is the Shallow Water Attack Submarine Program, or SWATS program. Now, for the Shallow Water Attack Submarine, the PN has gotten offers from China, which offered these new, smaller single-hull designs back in 2017 and 2018. Turkey via the STM 500, which is now under construction for the Turkish Navy, but it was also designed for the PN in mind. And Italy's Fincantieri via the S800, which was a scaled down version of the S1000 that Fincantieri had originally designed with Russia for India, interestingly enough. And doubly interesting was that back in Ideas 2024, Fincantieri showed up to the trade show with promotional material for its Type 212 NFS. And that again was very similar, in terms of the high level specifications to the STM TS 1700, like in terms of displacement and length. But the Type 212 NFS heavily stresses on the idea of stealth and endurance. Now, I am not saying the PN is going to get the Type 212 NFS, but I would hope so. But anyways, I'm not saying it'll go in that direction. But who knows? Maybe by working with Fincantieri on the Shallow Water Attack Submarine, it could potentially open the doors to gaining access to the fuel cell technology, the steel technology, and the batteries to make the next gen PN submarine, possibly. Now, to be clear, we don't know who for sure won that competition. There are some hints and possible signs, one of them being that Fincantieri has mysteriously, for some reason, invested in the Pakistan Navy's Maritime Science and Technology Park. But for all we know, that could be more of an upfront play to demonstrate interest in the Pakistan Navy project. We just don't know yet. And the reason being that the Pakistan Navy is really keeping the Shallow Water Attack Submarine program under very tight secret and wraps, right? It had mentioned existing, it had mentioned that they're on the way, but it hasn't gone into any of the details in terms of, where it's coming from. And I think it makes sense because, in my opinion, it connects to this next generation submarine project. So here's my take. Whoever the winner, be it China, Turkey, Italy, South Korea, whoever, they'll supply the Shallow Water Attack Submarine to replace the Agosta 70s. That'll help the Pakistan Navy reinforce its near littoral defense role. And in addition, the Pakistan Navy will then work with that winning partner to go design its next generation original submarine. And for the work they've done so far, from the struggle of the Agosta 9DB program to the capacity building by the Hangor to the more focused and stealthy work with the Shallow Water Attack Submarine, I think these things combined will eventually lead to the outcome of the PN becoming a quote-unquote submarine-building navy. And to be clear, there are many other ways this whole program can go. I think we can see the PN potentially showing interest in miniature submarines, think 200 to 300 tons, or smaller platforms like in the 100 to 150 ton range, like such as unmanned underwater vehicles or XL-UUVs and so on. Once NRDI starts to really mature in its capacity building, it can go in quite a few directions, to be honest. So I hope you enjoyed and got value from this quick take. Since we don't have any Defense Uncut episodes coming up for a couple of weeks, I'll also answer the questions you send me via email over here through separate videos as well. Finally, I do urge all of you once again to visit the Quwa website at quwa.org, and if possible, to subscribe to Quwa Plus. Honestly, look, when it comes to Pakistani defense news reporting, defense procurement analysis, and defense industry research, you won't get the depth and work anywhere else. I know, because that's why I founded Quwa in the first place. And if not, don't sweat it. Just send me an email if you're interested in reading a Quwa Plus article, and I'll send it over to you. So once again, thank you all. Take care and bye. And be sure to give our video a like, subscribe, and do use the comments to give us suggestions of what we should talk about next. Take care and see you next time.